You know how there are just people in this world that bring high energy wherever they go? The host of this week's Kid Podcast is one of those people. Her name is Melissa Victor, but you can also call her Melly. She is the host of Stoopkid Stories, a podcast that has so much joy and heart that I'm sure your kids will love it as much as mine do. I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. I'm a mom who has used podcasts to fight the boredom and loneliness of motherhood, and now I want to help you find a podcast that can do the same thing for you. It can be overwhelming to try and find a podcast you'll enjoy in the thousands of shows that are out there. That's where I come in. My episodes are short and they answer all of the questions you'll have about the podcast, so you'll know if it's a good fit for you or not. I'm here to help you find a podcast you'll love without wasting your time. Now, let's talk podcasts. This is how the host Melly describes the show. We follow 7 characters every episode as they face a new adventure and will have to overcome different obstacles dealing with their friends, family, school, and community. These stories are perfect for children ages 5 and up. The length of each episode is about 15 to 20 minutes. Before we learn more about the vibe of Stoopkid Stories, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my free podcast consultations. I've been able to talk to some amazing podcasters about their shows while doing interviews for the Friendly Podcast Guide. And along the way, I've learned so many tips and tricks on how to start a podcast from the hosts I've interviewed and from personal experience. I've talked to podcast hosts about what made their launch successful and what made it more difficult. And I for sure know what I would do differently if I could go back and launch my show again. And I want to share my knowledge with you. That's why I'm offering free podcast consults. And I have a couple of spots open in the next month. If you need help nailing down your podcast idea, figuring out your niche, or have any other podcast questions, I would love to work with you to make your show's launch the best it can be. If you're interested in working with me, fill out the intake form in the show notes. I can't wait to answer any and all of your podcast questions. Now we get to hear from Melly as she talks about all of the different types of kids that can use Stoopkid Stories in their lives. Melly, thank you so much for being on the Friendly Podcast Guide today. I cannot wait to talk about your kid podcast. But before we dive in, can you introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners?
Yes. Thank you for having me. Everybody, my name is Melissa, but you can call me Melly, and I am the creator and host of an amazing kid podcast called Stoopkid Stories. So that's me.
I love it. Everyone knows, but we love kid podcasts at our house. Me almost more so than the children because it is like my go-to parenting tool that is easy to use and my kids love it. So why not use it all the time? So we love to introduce more kid podcasts I like finding them and I like introducing them to my listeners. So thank you so much for making a kid podcast. They're the best. And we're going to dive right in. Why did you start Stoopkid Stories?
So I started Stoopkid Stories because, one, I'm an actor first. And I was in between gigs and I needed something to keep me creatively fulfilled. And I've always loved teaching kids and working with kids. So the idea came to me to make a podcast, and specifically to make a podcast about Black kids growing up in the city, just being everyday kids, so that kids who look and sound like me can hear themselves represented in storytelling in this medium. And also for kids who don't look like me to get a inside view of what it's like to just be a Black kid in the inner city. So you get a window in both ways.
Definitely. Yeah. And especially when like kids live in a more homogenous, like they don't get exposed to kids that look different than them or sound different from them or like live life a little bit different than them. Right. Yeah. Kid podcasts we need more. We need more kid podcasts that are different and not just homogenous. So thank you for doing that. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm sure that all of your listeners are grateful for that.
I hope so.
So as we kind of talked about, so you want to give that window for kids to see themselves or see kids that might not be exactly like them. I'm assuming that's one thing you want kids to get out of your podcast. What else do you want kids and their parents to get out of your podcast?
I want them to have a fun time first. Like I am all like, if you listen to the theme song gets you up and moving and dancing. And I have so many listeners who know the theme song by heart and they sing it. So I want you to have fun first, but I also want you to get to know these characters and see what their daily lives is like. And maybe you can learn something. Maybe when you're listening, you're having an issue with your brother or your sister, and you hear the BB twins, how they resolve their arguments, or you're scared to ride your bike without training wheels, and you hear how brave Nathaniel was. So there are so many lessons in each and every episode that kids and grown-ups can take away from. I've had a lot of parents say, thank you for that episode. I needed that. I needed to learn how to be brave and stand up to my boss. So I needed to learn how to find my voice in this uncomfortable situation. So fun and taking away a lesson. Those are my two big things.
Definitely. And I completely agree. We might need to add the theme song to the end of this episode because I love it so much. So maybe we just need to like do that and just like so that people get a little taste, and then they're going to obviously want to go listen to it on your episodes because it's just so fun, like you said. And so I think that'll be like, if you're good with that, I really want to do that because it makes me so happy. Okay,
dance party at the end of the episode.
Exactly. I love it. Okay, so you talked about wanting to have fun in your episodes. What other words would you use to describe the vibe of your show?
So the vibe to me is, so for my 90s babies, it gives very much Hey Arnold from Nickelodeon meets like Proud Family from Disney Channel, right?
Yeah.
Fun, they're fun, but in a storytelling way, because it's me reading all the stories. So it's these real life situations that are really illustrated, and I hope beautifully narrated by me. These like loud, rambunctious, optimistic, curious kids, the same way that Arnold and Gerald were in Hey Arnold, the same way Penny Prout was. Like, those characters growing up really stuck in my head, and I wanted to create that world in this podcast world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if I've ever had someone describe a show using 90s cartoons, but I love it, and I feel like this should be a thing.
Which 90s cartoon is your show?
Right? Okay, that might need to be a new Friendly Podcast Guide question because...
That's a segment, yes.
I absolutely love that. Okay. And I can totally picture it. So it worked perfectly for me. I know exactly what your vibe is. So So I like to ask my hosts what their favorite episode is, but before I do that, to give you a second to think about it, can you tell me, where can people find you?
I am on every single podcast platform that you can imagine, every single one. Whether you listen to Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, I'm there. I'm also on Storytopia. Shout out to Meredith Kelly for Storytopia. Because I know a lot of people are building kids podcast apps. So look out for your independent creators who are making apps for kids. But wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you can find Stoopkid Stories. And you can also find me on Instagram, not Twitter anymore, but you can find me on Instagram at Stoopkid Stories.
Perfect. I will make sure to link that in the show notes so that people can find you there. And then there's a Stoopkid Stories website, right?
Yes, it's stoopkidstories.com. Yeah. Simple.
Perfect. We'll put that link in there too for people that want to find you there. Okay, now you're kind of on the spot. Do you have a favorite episode or a couple of episodes? Because I do know it's hard to choose just one.
Okay. My so I mean, we're like 7 seasons in.
You have a lot of episodes.
I know. So I'm really proud of myself because I think it was like season 2. I did an episode, or season 1. I don't know, but this episode's called The Adventure, and it was The Adventure Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, and it sent the my 7 Stoop kids on an adventure around their neighborhood, but they had to use they had to answer questions and clues that were all related to Black history facts in order to get home. So that was like really cool to write and to play in, and also to teach people about Black history facts that they probably didn't know. And I also have an episode called I think it's The Helping Hand, where Peach and Nathaniel, I don't know if it's Peach and Nathaniel. It's two of them. And they go to a foster home with one of the grown-ups, and they donate clothes to kids at a foster home. It was the first experience that they've had, and you learn about sharing and giving back, and then they make a new friend named Lyric. So that's another point of view of how kids live. Like, not everyone comes from a two-parent household. Totally. Not everyone comes from, we all live in this big single family house. Like, no, some kids go to school and then they come back home and they go to a homeless shelter, or they go into foster care, and it's someone who's adopted. Showing the different dynamics of families is really, really important to me. So that's an episode that I'm really proud of that I wrote. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. I will have to link all of those because I haven't listened to the adventure ones, and those sound fantastic. Especially, obviously, this episode isn't coming out in February, but like I feel like we'll need to revisit during Black History Month because that sounds perfect. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to find because like my oldest is 6, and so sometimes it's hard to find like I don't know, like a way for him to like take in the information that he's like excited about, if that makes sense. Like that's like fun and entertaining, but also he's learning and like taking it all in. And so I think this will be a really great way, and I'm really excited. We'll listen to it. We'll probably listen to it like today at lunch, but also we'll revisit in February.
You have to tell me what he thinks. Like, let me know.
Oh, I totally will. Yeah, I'm sure he'll love it. And my 4-year-old, I'm sure is going to love the theme song. Oh, really excited about that. So yeah, she's my dancer, so she's just gonna like bop along, and I'm so excited.
Oh, that makes me so many people send me videos of their Stoopkids dancing or rapping the theme song, and it makes my heart
my gosh happy. Oh yes. Oh my gosh, isn't it so fun when like people enjoy the things that we create? I just love it. Yes. It just makes me so happy.
Yes, because you get a little bit of imposter syndrome, like
oh my gosh, yes.
I'm new to when I started, I was new to the podcast world. Like, I'm used to being on stage singing and dancing. So just to create something and have it, one, resonate with people, and then just the fact that people just like it and they listen to it over and over again. I was like, wow, I created something.
Yes. Well, and it's kind of hard when you're just like making it at your desk. Like there's not immediate feedback, like it's like delayed. Right. It's interesting. But cool because it reaches a bigger audience. So, well, hopefully, like that's the plan at least.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Totally. Okay. So I like to ask all of my kid podcast hosts that I talk to, what age is your podcast like for? Obviously, like kids that are older and younger will listen and love it. But like, what's your like target audience?
My target audience is, I always say 4 to 8. Because what I've learned is that, kids who are 9 and 10 still love me, but they've moved on to the, big kid podcast. But 4 to 8 is like my sweet spot. Because the characters in the show, they're in middle school, but the lessons that they're learning are stuff that a 4-year-old can learn when they're going to kindergarten for the first time, and that an 8-year-old can learn, when they're at summer camp. So 4 to 8, I would say.
Okay, perfect. And, like I said, I feel like outside of that range, you were talking about adults that like learn things from it. So obviously it's a bigger range, but I always like to ask so that parents kind of get a feel for like which kids are going to enjoy it the most, or all of that jazz.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It has been a delight. And thank you for making a kid podcast. We love kid podcasts, and we just need more out there. I love, because podcasts in general, like for adults, there are so many options for adults, and we're still getting there with kid podcasts. So thank you for being one of the creators that helps my kids have more options to listen to while in the car.
And thank you for listening. We wouldn't be here without people who, open their phones and listen. So thank you for listening, and thank you to everyone who listens over and over again. It's really, really helpful.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you know someone who could use Stoopkid Stories in their life, will you share this episode with them? Also, if you have an itch to start your own podcast, fill out the intake form in the show notes so I can help you make your podcast dreams come true. Talk to you soon. Okay, as promised, here's the music that you hear every time you start an episode of Stoopkid Stories.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go. Yo. Sitting on the stoop, chilling with your friends, hoping that the fun times will never end. You got your homie to your left, your bestie to your right, feeling like a stoop kid and everything is nice. Got a couple of friends that I want you to meet. Super cool and super fun, walking to their own